Good evening, everybody. Thursday night, we are in our study of Romans chapters 1 through 8, and we are taking and doing a supplemental insertion. We've had a number of them, and this will be the last one, or the next to the last one. I think probably it'll be the next to the last one. And there are a number of those that I did. We listed them the last time. And I'm not going to go back over them, but here we are in 1 Corinthians 13, and we began out of 1 John 8, 4, 8, excuse me, God is love, and we're talking just about that concept now. We're going to go into 1 Corinthians 13, and what's called the great love chapter of Paul. We're going to fuss with that, but I want to show you this one more time. And the reason why I thought we need to insert love here is because of the direction that Romans 1 through 8 goes, especially as we transition from chapter 6 and chapter 7. Chapter 7 going into the transition period of the law and whatnot. It shows the restrictions and the limitations of the law. And chapter 6 showed us everything from God's perspective, and chapter 5 told us what is. And now, when I was fixing to go into that, it dawned on me, we ought to probably set a baseline for all this, and that had to do with two things. One, sin nature, and different verses on that, and then the basis of it is love. So we're talking about God is love. And just enough to say that the concept of love goes all the way back before this slide ever appears. Way back before that, on into eternity. God is love. We're coming back from there. God so loved the world that he created it, that he gave his son for it. And that love of the world didn't start when Jesus was born or humanity fell, whatnot. It's an eternal quality, and that's what we've been talking about. I don't want to have to backtrack any more than that. Any more than that, we're going to proceed with where I was here when we left off. And this is about where we left off. So we left off here, actually went further, and we're going to talk a little bit about love, the basis of it, and different things about it before we jump into 1 Corinthians 13. We had mentioned that we left off with the martyrs when they die, when they get killed for their testimony, is a form of love. They die for they die for loving God, their love of the Lord and whatnot, and that. Because of that, they are killed and they are martyred, and their martyrdom is actually a sacrifice in a sense, is an intercessory prayer for those that are still lost. And we left it out there, and we mentioned this. The last statement was that this love that we talked about, forgiveness of sin, which releases us, creates a new relationship between us and God. It's a relationship of mercy and reconciliation. Now, and here's where we are picking it up then, with these thoughts. The sacrifice of Jesus as a prerogative of love, or as a demonstration of the eternal love of God, is actually an action of divine judgment. I'll catch it again. The sacrifice of Jesus. In fact, we could say the whole Christ event, in a sense, is too, and his life is, and the sacrificial element in there, his beating, his sacrifice, as he was alive and walked, his life was a sacrificial life, let alone the sacrifice of his own literal life on the cross for our sin, in fulfillment of what the Old Testament required for the payment of sin. He did that. And that requirement of a payment of sin is itself a judgment. So, the sacrifice of Jesus, which is the ultimate expression of the eternal love of God toward humanity before anything was ever created, is an act of divine judgment. Jesus took that upon himself, and that then establishes a new order, what we call a new people, what we really call a new community. Jesus now is our new ancestral head. The second Adam, Jesus is our new ancestral head, as opposed to the first ancestral head, which was Adam, and shot the human race down the sewer, if you will. So God's love then, seen this way, is a pardoning love. He pardons us. God sent his son to the cross in an act of love for humanity. God loved the world like this, that he gave his son for it. And so God then in turn calls his elect, which is you, which is me. He calls us in love. It's not out of a desire to torment us that he calls us. It's not out of a desire for God to cheat us in life in some way, shape, or form that he calls us. He doesn't do that. His call is a call of love. He has a great eternity plan for every one of us, and he calls us to that, and that call is a call of love. God endows his people with love by the virtue of the fact that the Holy Spirit lives within us. So then, what we get is this, that we are then to be, because of that, new humanity is what we say, characterized with or by God's agape love. Not that it becomes resident within us in and of itself and part and parcel of the fabric of our nature, but it's in us to the degree to which Jesus is in us, that love is here because he is here, because the Holy Spirit is here, you understand. And then it flow through us. The scripture talks about faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these, it says, is love, agape, because only agape stretches all the way out in eternity past, coming through time, and out back into eternity future, if we put it in those terms. It's the only one that reaches and stretches out that far over the eons of eternity to eternity to eternity, whatnot like that. All right? So love is the most fundamental thing there is anywhere. God is the most fundamental thing. God is love. Love is God. It's one in the same. So this God's agape, God's love is transformational. You can go all the way back to creation when it says God loved the world like this, that he created it. How much more transformational does one need to get than that? That's transformational. God loved the world like this, that he created humanity in his own image and likeness. That's transformational. God loved the world like this, that he gave his son to redeem lost humanity. That's transformational. You see, God's love is transformational. It transforms everything. Us. It'll transform us. It'll transform us. We are new humanity characterized by that. All right? The death of Jesus on the cross condemns sin and condemns evil. And we need to understand this too before going further, because it has a direct relationship to our being forgiven and our being saved in God's working in us. Evil flat out exhausted itself at the cross event. It did its worst. It did its worst work there. When I say worst, I mean most evil, most sinister, most belial work it could ever do. Evil did to Jesus on the cross. Evil unleashed everything it had at Jesus. And Jesus did not crack. He did not falter. He overcame it. Evil exhausted its all it had, its resources. It's still around, but it exhausted. It just took everything out. Love evil is the force of anti-creation. Evil is a force of anti-life. Evil is the force that opposes God. And that evil opposed Jesus. That evil thought it was really killing God when it killed Christ, but it really didn't know what it was doing. It really didn't know what it was doing. To the point where Paul said in 1 Corinthians, if those who kill Christ, evil, regardless if it's in human or spirit or whatever, Satan himself, if they only had known what God was up to, about what God had planned to how to redeem humanity, they never would have killed Jesus on the cross, because God resurrected. They played right straight into God's eternal mystery in God's hand, evil did. And it still does that. It still does that today. All of this we see going on around today is essentially playing right into God's hand. God is going to flip it around. Watch, that's what's going to happen. Evil is the force that seeks to destroy humanity, to kill humanity, to burn down society. That's not godly. That's not good. That's evil. Flat straight evil. It is satanic. And to support that and refuse to call that out is satanic itself as well. And all of that results in death. The death of the final enemy eventually, which will be evil and Satan and those who align themselves with it. Now, all of that being said, that brings us to the resurrection of Jesus out of the dead. Death itself has no more power over you, any true believer. Death has no power. It absolutely has no power. It probably would not be a bad idea to go through 1 Corinthians 15 on resurrection, but we won't go that far. But death has no more power. Where is your victory? Where is your Nike, death? Where is your victory? Where is your power? It's gone. It is gone. It is gone. It is gone. It is gone. Even though we die, we live in Christ. You cannot die. Your body is going to die and go, but not you. You will not die. You will live. Resurrection means forgiveness of sins. Forgiveness of sins. It's symbolic of the forgiveness of sins. Buried in baptism with Christ and resurrected to a newness of life. To be released from sin is to be released from death and evil. To be released from sin is to be resurrected already in a sense. So what did Jesus do? Let's get down to some of this more. We find in the life of Jesus that Jesus identified evil for what it was. He called it out. He wasn't nice like a lot of these Christians are. Oh, it's too rough. You're raising your voice. That scares us. Oh, we're going to go to a safe corner somewhere. We're going to go to a safe corner. No, Jesus called it straight out. He called the Pharisees a den of vipers. He referred to the money changers as creating a situation in the temple. It made it into a den of robbers and thieves. That language is very strong. And in that day was really, really strong. Called it out for what it was. He named it too. He named it, flat out named evil. And he confronted it by identifying and calling it out. He confronted it. We have people today that can't confront anything that's really evil. Well, I don't want to offend them. There are people today, I've heard of people who play for Satan's conversion, for crying out loud, because they don't want a confrontation. Can you imagine that? That's fact. It's incredible. He confronted it. And those who acquiesced, those who accepted him, he forgave it. So he identified it, named it, and confronted it. If people had confessed to the truth of it, he'd forgive them. Now, when we forgive someone, this is part of the whole picture of Romans 7 and 8 too. One, we do one or two things. One, we release them from the burden of our anger and the possible consequences of that. When somebody done you wrong, if you will, put it that way, you can get angry, correct? You get angry with it. You say, well, that dirty dog, or whatever it is we say. And if you let that fester and keep fussing with it, it's going to cause some consequences and problems. So what do? Get rid of it. We forgive it. If somebody has done you like that, forgive it. Just forget it. Forget it. Now you won't forget it. It'll always remember it. But when I say forget it, I mean push it back, let it go, turn it loose, in other words. Secondly, when we do that, we release ourselves from the burden of whatever was done to us. And we release ourselves from a crippled emotional state, if you will, that would certainly ensue upon us if we didn't forgive. So what Jesus do? Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Why did he forgive them? Why did he say that? Would you think that they were forgiven? They never confessed it, or the one did, the other didn't. They didn't confess it. What was Jesus doing? Jesus was saying, as far as I'm concerned, it's forgiven. Take it away from me. Forgive it. Forgiveness is a central part, by the way, of being delivered from evil. Father, deliver us from evil. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, as it says. That's the best way to be set free. Is start forgiving. Start forgiving the troubles there. All right. Now, let's get to another. Let's keep going here. I want to go now right into verse 13. Right into 1 Corinthians 13. And I'm trying to find myself here. And I'll find it pretty soon. Even though I'm in this room. it'll be, I got a double set of pages here for some reason. I don't understand how in the world that happened. But I'm coming to the end of it, I think. It seems like I'm going through them twice. Give me just a minute. There's no way to do it but to get through it. Here. Something is really messed up here. Oh, here we go. That's what it was. It was a double set. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I had gone over it several times before starting, but it happens here. Okay, Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 12:31b. Now, 1 Corinthians 13 starts in 1 Corinthians 12, at the last half of verse 31 in 1 Corinthians 12, where Paul says this. And still, he says, I show you a hyper way. That's my translation, a hyper way. Literally, that's what it means. Kai eti kath huperbolain hadan humin deknumi. Means, and yet I show to you a more excellent, as the translation is, a hyperbole, a hyper way, a pathway here. That's what it means. So what does this mean when he says, given all of this, still I'm going to show you a better or a hyper way. When this word is here, huper means hyper. Bole means to overdo it, to throw over. So when he's talking about a hyper way, he's talking about a way that cannot be matched by any other way. It is to overshoot, to go above the norm, above the measure, to be a transcendent idea. There's nothing like it. It's unbeatable. There's no match for it. There's no comparison. This way is that way. And he's making it very plain to us, he said. He's going to point it out, and the rest of all of chapter 13 points it out and delineates it line by line. The word way means, it's a means of access. It's a point of entrance, a direction or a journey. We enter into that roadway, and we follow it. And so then it's a systematic course or a systematic pursuit of a certain action to that effect. Okay, so we're talking about then this. Love is. Agape estin. Love is. 1 Corinthians 13. And we've already fussed with that, so here we go. Baseline understanding on all this begins here in verse 1. And we're going to start with the main clauses and not the if conditions. There is an if. It's if I this and if I that and if I something else, then I'm this and I'm that, or I'm gonna or I'm what, or whatever that is, okay? So here's what we have. The first thing he says is this. I have become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. Sounding and clanging are participles identifying the action in the brass and the cymbal. Actually, they're verbal adjectives, which means they are modifying the brass and modifying the cymbal, but there's action in it too. It's a brass that is sounding, and then it's a cymbal that is clanging. So what in the world does that mean? Clanging means a roar. That means a roar. Have you ever been in church services where it sounded like a roar of Niagara? That can be positive or negative, as a matter of fact. I've been in some that were very positive in that regard, but we're not talking like that. This sounding brass is like a clanging or a hollow kind of thing. It's just a roar, which really means it's only a noise. It's a noise. I'm saying this. I think this is telling us there's a lot of noise in the church world today. I mean an awful lot of noise. A whole lot of noise going on. And nobody can pick out what's anything in there that means anything or that's of any significance or meaning, but a lot of noise. The symbol is a hollow sign. Actually, it's like a war cry, a yell, like we used to say, a rebel yell in the southern military there, or a loud sound. It's just a banging sound. And Paul says, this is what we are if this is the situation over here. And not spend a lot of time on all this because I want to get to the other stuff, which will probably be later. We are a sounding brass and a clanging cymbal if we should speak in tongues and speak as tongues and of angels, and if I should not have love. If that's the case. If I should speak in tongues and of angels, and if I don't have love. He is saying then, if that's the case, if that's true, he's talking about church life in one sense, but he's talking about our life individually too. If we can speak in every language in the world, glossolalia all over the place, and we speak like angels speak, and all this glorious music, all this glorious and all that rhetoric and all that nonsense, but we don't have love, what is it? It's just a noisy brass instrument playing no melody, just blowing it, and a clanging cymbal that's just banging away. That's what it is. There's a lot of that in the church world today. Now, when it says, and don't have love, it's not talking about being a possession of ours. It's not talking about possessing that love. It's talking about having the one who is love even living in your heart, is what it's talking about. If you do all that, and you don't have Christ living on the inside of you, and the Spirit living on the inside of you, and if you're not allowing the Lord and the Holy Spirit to work in you, it's just a clanging noise. The next thing he says, I am nothing at all, or I am nothing, in no way am I anything. I put it that way. It's kind of comical, but literally that's what it's like. And what it's a point of emphasis here. The emphasis is on this. Hey, listen, we got a lot of people running around in the church world thinking they're really something, thinking they're really it. I mean, I got all these gifts. All these gifts are mine. Well, first of all, they're not anybody's anyway. You're just a vessel that God will use them through. I am nothing and nothing at all, he said, in any way, shape, or form. That's the right attitude on one hand, but he says, that's what I am. If this is the situation here, if I should have prophecy, if I should have come to know all mysteries, stuff that isn't known, if I should have all knowledge, if I should happen to know all knowledge, he says, if I should happen to know that inside here, if I should have every part of faith so that I could literally remove mountains, and I do not have love in here, he is saying, I'm absolutely nothing. Nothing whatsoever. There isn't any way, shape, or form that I am counted as anything if that's the case. All right? And have not love. Again, not as a personal attribute. That's not what we're saying. That's not what he's saying either, because it's not even an attribute of God. It is what God is. And so if Jesus, who is God, the Spirit who is God, live on the inside of you, then they are there. Now the next one he says is this. I am gaining nothing, or I am without profit. I am without any return whatsoever. In any way I have nothing, and this is the occasion that happens. If I should give away all of my possessions, all of them, if I should deliver my body so that I can brag about putting my body under and beating my body, whatever it is it's doing, and I don't have any love, he says, then there's no profit in that. There's no value in that. I am without any gain on the investment. There's no return on the investment, he's saying there. The problem with all this is that there is no human being who inherently possesses agape, this God love. Every human being possesses the eros, the storge, and the phileo, but not the agape. It is not in us. It's not part and parcel to our nature. It can only flow through us to the degree to which we allow the Spirit to work through us in the person of Christ. We cannot measure up to these standards. It's not possible to measure up to these standards. And yet these are true standards. Paul is saying facts and truth. He is saying that. These are indeed the truth. These are the case. But nobody can live up to that on our own merit, out of our own recognizance, out of our own whatever it is we are. We can't do that. We can't do that. We have to rely on the Jesus who lives on the inside of us. Again, we're going back to principles here. 1 Corinthians 13, 4 and following. Now, here we go. We're going to get into some other stuff. We're going to get in, he's going to describe all these things here, what love is. And these are verbs. Love is. Agape estin. Love is. Pronounce that on the top. Agape estin. Love is. First word is macrothume. Macrothume. You can say that. Macrothume. Pronounce it like that. Although what looks like an O is not an O, it's an omega. And it's not pronounced as, it's not pronounced as O, it's pronounced as all. It's an omicron. Macrothume. What does it mean? It's two words. One, macro means long, doesn't it? It's a computer term. We have macro, micro. Micro is what? Small. Macro is longer. It takes longer. It's a bigger span. Thumeo is an explosion. So what does it say? A long explosion or a slow explosion? It means slow explosion. In other words, it takes a long time to make you explode. That's what love is. Love is seen in this, that it takes a very long time for agape to explode, to reach its explosion point. All right? That's what this is talking about. But with us, that's a different picture there. But that's what love really is. None of us have that. We fall short in this in every way, shape, or form. But God doesn't. God is that. Next it says this, that love is, it can be kind or gentle. Chrestuatai is the word. Love is chrestuatai. The word means benign. It's not harmful, it's harmless in that sense. It's benign. If you have a tumor that's malignant, it's growing and it's aggressive, it's going to kill you. Benign is not. It's just there. Not that it's good for love just to sit there and do nothing. That's not what they're saying. It's not going to harm anybody. It's harmless. It's not a threat. Love, put it like this. Love is not a threat. It is not. It won't be a threat. It is, on the other hand, kind and gentle. I've never known anybody to be kind and gentle all the time. There are moments when that happens. I've never known anybody to be benign all the time. That's just not there. But God is, and Jesus is. It says here that love is not jealous or malice. The word is zeloi. The first part of that phrase that's highlighted in yellow is the word that means not. It is not zeloi. Zeloi, it is not that. It is not full of malice. It does not exhibit indignation. It is not jealous over anybody else. It's not it. It is not that. There's no human being that's ever lived or ever will live can claim that as a attribute in their life, that they were born that way. Next, love doesn't brag. It is pereutai. Pereutai. It means to brag, boast and brag. I mean a big mouth. You've seen big mouths do that. To vaunt oneself. We had a friend in school, high school. That's all the critter ever did is talk about himself. He started with something else, and he always ends up how he was always better than anything anybody was ever talking about. And nobody could do it as him. He could always do it. brag and vaunt. Love doesn't do that. People do that to some degree. All of us do. But not God. Not Jesus. Love then is not puffed up or inflated. The word there is susiutai. Susiutai. And it's not talking about somebody named Susie. That's not what it's saying here. But it's susiutai. Means puffed up or inflated. You've seen these fish that if they're threatened, they puff way up like they're really something and really big when they're really not. That's a good illustration of this. God doesn't have to make himself to appear something more than what he is. Think of this. How in the world could he do that? There are people who think they have to make themselves look better and look more than what they are. Like falsifying credentials. Like saying you graduated in the top 3 when the truth is you graduated in the bottom 3. Or like you graduated in a triple major but you barely made it through one major. You understand? Or you went to this university but the trouble is you didn't. You went to a different university. All that kind of stuff. Bragging up to make them, in order to make themselves think that they would be accepted. Agape doesn't do that. God doesn't need to do that. Everything that there is in him. It doesn't need it. Love does not exhibit characteristics of indecorum, behave itself wrongly here. The word here is askumene. Askumene. It talks about an external indecorum, an outward action, in a manner to act in a manner that is open to censor. You know, I don't know of anybody that's never acted in a manner that wouldn't be open to a censor at some point in time in their life, even if it's only once. But even if it's only once as that, some people have a harder time with this as they do with others as well. You understand? There's no human being can measure up to that, and I get a little put out when people say, "Oh, I just don't his manner, his demeanor, is this or that or the other." Baloney. What about you yourself? There's plenty in everybody to have a trouble with here. Next, it says this: love does not pursue itself for itself. The word is zete, ta, I'll taste. Zete, ta, taste. It's hard to see on an angle here. That means simply this. The taste, the last word in that Greek phrase is yourself, is oneself, is self. It's called a reflexive pronoun. And that means the pronoun is the verbal action zete is going into the reflexive pronoun, the person who's doing the talking. In other words, the person talking is receiving the own action of itself. What it's saying here then, agape does not pursue the self. It does not pursue the things of the self, for the self, and by the self, and in the self, and all of that. It does not do that. That's what it's talking about here. The word zete is almost akin to a jealousy, by the way, as well, but it's not the same word. Next, love, agape, doesn't stir things up. It doesn't incite a riot. It doesn't make for demonstrations that burn buildings down and hurt people and pull people out of cars and beat the daylights out of them and all that stuff. Love doesn't do that. The word here is parazunatai. Parazunatai, para being along beside. It means to incite. It's a passive voice, by the way. You'll notice that there. What does it mean to be passive? True love does not become involved with inciting riots or inciting destructive things or stirring up contention. It does not do that for the sake of it. I've known a lot of people stir up contention in churches elsewhere all over the place. Recalcitrant people, people that are invasive of other people's territory out of self. But real love doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. Then the next one is to calculate or to total. The word is logizetai kakan. Logizetai kakan. It does not tally up or calculate or total up evil or bad deeds. In other words, it doesn't go around with a calculator and going around and adding everybody's misdeeds in there and coming up with a sum total. It's an accountant's word is what we're using here. And next, it doesn't do that. It just lets it go. Next, love does not rejoice in unrighteous actions. Kyre is a word for rejoice. Epi te adikia. Epi means to be the Lord over, to be above here. It doesn't, which means this then, rejoice. It doesn't get on top of an unrighteous act and lord over it and laud it and all of that. It doesn't rejoice in there. It doesn't say, oh, come and look at this unrighteous act. Isn't this great? Isn't this great? It's just incredible. Okay? It doesn't do that. It doesn't rejoice in an unright action. Now, the next phrase is the opposite of that. But it doesn't rejoice in an unright action. True love won't do that. But real love will do this. It will rejoice with truth. And the word here, you'll notice, is a combination of two. I can't reach that far. It's one over. Sug, Kyre. It is with rejoice. It means with rejoices in truth or in with truth. It means this. It means this. It means to rejoice with rejoice means the rejoicing and you are together, locked together. Love is locked together with rejoicing, inextricably bound together. Love and rejoicing in truth, not in unrighteousness, but in truth. In truth, in truth. That's what it is. So we could use a little bit of that in this country today. Some truth here. Next, it says, we got 4 phrases, all that have to do with all things, and it's a final statement of this. And this will be our last section for this evening, and we'll pick this up. We might just come back tomorrow night so I can finish this off and start next week in Romans 7. Panta stege, panta pistue, panta elpidze, panta hupomene. All things. The panta there, the first word is all things. When it says that it covers all things, will probably be a translation in your text there. So it covers all things. What does it mean? Well, the word for cover there, stege, means a roof. It means a roof over your head. You could put it like this. You put it like this. Love, God's love, agape, is a roof over your head. Are you with me? This is a very pictorial. God's love, His banner over me, the song says, is love. His love is a roof over us. And His love protects us and shields us, follows us everywhere you go. We can't outrun His love. His love is a roof over our life. The cover that hovers over and above us and keeps us surrounded in His love. That's what agape is. It's not resident with humanity, only with God. Next it says, agape pistue, panta pistue. All things, believes all things. The subject of the verb is coming first in the way it's written. Believes is the word translated faith or believe or trust. It doesn't mean that love believes a lie or that love believes a falsehood. That doesn't do that. That's not what it's saying. But it doesn't, it really simply is talking about, as I see it, prejudging. Love doesn't prejudge something that it hears, if you will. It lets it work itself out in that sense. Maybe perhaps accept that it would absolutely know this or that. That's possible. But it believes. It gives, another way of looking at it, it gives the benefit of the doubt. This is maybe a better way to say it. God's love will give the benefit of the doubt. God will give you a benefit of a doubt. Jesus gives us a benefit of the doubt in that sense. And that is an expression of God's love. Next it says that love hopes all things. Now that hope doesn't mean a wish here. The root word is elpidzo, but here it's elpidze, the ending indicates that it hopes. It's a third person singular. Love hopes all things. That doesn't mean it wishes all things, or it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a clue what's going to happen, and it's just hoping that things, desperately hoping that things work. That's not it. All things are the future that tell us it's to where we're going. The all things are. That's where we're going. Can you turn it over here? It's where we're going out here is your hope. Our hope is beyond. It's in eternity. That's where we're moving towards, okay? The love of God from eternity. God loved the world like this. That way back in eternity, he created it in his head. Way back in eternity, he created humanity in his mystery. He created it, all right? Way back in eternity, before anything was, he knew he was going to create. He knew that he'd create time, humanity in time. He knew that it would be going down that eschatological line on into the telos beyond, where our hope is. And what I'm saying is, God moves things along out of eternity, on in through time, and back out through eternity, where we're going. Where is our hope? And God's love moves that way, down through history and time, and ends up in hope. Love is always moving towards hope, toward the future in that regard. And our hope is a sure hope. Our hope is none less than the person of Jesus Christ. He is our living hope. The one who loved us to the point of giving his life to save our life. And God's love is focused on that. And if Jesus lives within us and the Holy Spirit lives within us, each of whom is love personified in that regard, then they will be working through us that same desire and love and focus on the end wherein our hope is and where our salvation comes from. Lastly, it says this agape under abides all things. It is patient, it might say. It under abides all things. It doesn't jump the gun is maybe a good way to say this. It doesn't run before the whistle is blown or the trumpet blows or whatever like that. It under abides. It waits and waits and waits. They that wait upon the Lord. That's what real love really does. That's what agape does. And God's patience. God is patient with humanity. Not willing that any should perish, but that all would come to him. And so he's patient in love, in all that we've talked about. Now, what we're saying here, we'll finish this, but try to do this tomorrow night. What we're saying here is God is love. Love is God, and that is the thing that undergirds every truth and everything that is. It's behind it from eternity to eternity. That's what Romans 1 through 8, the whole Bible is based on and laid upon. That's what we're talking about in Romans 5, 6, 7, and 8. It all comes out of that. And that's why I've taken the time to do this. I hope that you've learned something from here. I've gone a little longer than I wanted to, but it's a good breaking off point right here. And so consider these things. God is love. We are not love, but God is. Agape we're talking about. Agape, let's understand that. It would be better if we use that term. It would be better if we would use eros, storge, phileo, or agape in order to make it plain to somebody exactly what kind of love we're talking about when we use the word love. Because the way a lot of these goofy people use the word love, it certainly is not agape that they're talking about. All right? Okay, in the Lord, we'll see you next time. Have a good night.